People who cater to the super rich. What things have you seen? Story 1. I fly private jets for a living. The levels of excess and indulgence I see are insane. 50k worth of dishes that never get used. A vacation to Norway last year cost around 450k. The plane I fly right now is around 40 million. Flying the family dogs on the jet an hour to their preferred groomer. A day trip to Maui just for a same-day passport. 34,000 month for our satellite-based Wi-Fi. The edit I'm at work and closed the app before I finished the comment. I didn't think it posted. I'm still alive and definitely not a sniper posting on my victim's phone. Definitely not. Story 2. My niece had a scholarship to an excellent university she would never have been able to afford. Therefore there were many people attending that came for money. She was lucky enough to room with really nice people. The girls she was with would just give her clothing and bags like Prada and Gucci, like stuff that cost thousands of dollars. My niece would say, "I can't take this." The girls would say stuff like, "Don't worry, I have another one that's almost just like it," or "My aunt gave it to me and I just don't like the color," or something like that. They were super nice, but the fact that they thought nothing of giving away items that cost thousands of dollars. My niece would tell me, "They gave me a bag that's worth more than my car." Story 3. My friend's wife flies to Aspen when she has a headache. Not for a headache treatment, just to breathe better air. Meanwhile, I treat my migraines by turning off the lights and putting a wet face cloth over my forehead. Story 4. About 20 years ago, I was the personal assistant nanny for a billionaire family in SoCal. At first, they were such lovely people, but slowly all of their dysfunction overtook the happy veneer. The husband spent almost all of his time away and barely checked in with his family. The wife was the epitome of the bored, neglected rich second wife who ignored her only child in private but pretended to be mother of the year in public. She would take one yoga class a day and attend one high society function, and then spend the rest of the day bemoaning how difficult and stressful her life was. The child was neglected, unloved, and acted out constantly. He reminded me of one of the kids from Russian orphanages that weren't held as babies and grew up not being able to form attachments to other human beings. He basically lived alone in this mansion with only myself, the cook and housemaid, and his mother who barely even spoke to him and who I never saw hug him, much less play with him. I essentially drove him to school, and to all the activities he didn't want to do but kept him out of her way, helped him do his homework and tucked him in at night. He hated me no matter how I tried to bond with him, which I could understand because all he needed was his parents' love and attention, and didn't want me as a replacement. I ended up getting fired after the holidays because I was tasked with planning their Christmas vacation, and after a month of intense planning, booking a private villa, organizing their private jet, the house staff at the location, ordering all the necessary food and getting all the activities planned, the wife decided 2 days out that she no longer wanted to go to that location, but to a private island instead. When I informed her of the lack of availability at the new destination and cost of lost deposits etc., but did provide her a list of options to choose from, she blamed me for ruining their holidays because I should have anticipated and planned a backup at the exact location she wanted that she had never previously mentioned. I was so happy to have been fired from that mausoleum of rich malaise and despair, and honestly, I've sadly enjoyed reading the news over the years of the husband moving on to his fourth and now fifth much younger wives, get caught up in legal drama for corruption, and she off into obscurity once she was divorced from her place in high society. Unfortunately, I've seen the kid's social media, and he's turned out to be another uber-rich soulless douchebag, and will probably just play out his father's life beat by beat in an attempt to forever try to earn his attention, love and respect. Story 5. Worked a 3 million wedding. My in-laws own the premier florist in town. The flower budget was 250k, they blew that out of the water. I think it ended up being in excess of 480k, the wedding was on the bride's father's land. An entire section of land, 600 acres with 3 houses, 2 churches, barn and a private polo field. The horse stalls were nicer than my first apartment. By barn I mean a Amish-built barn the guy found in New York State. Had it dismantled and reassembled on his land and turned into an apartment. I had to move a painting from the mantel for decorating. They told me after it was worth 1.5 million. The tent for the wedding could have held 2 of Barnum Bayless 3 rings. Everything was over the top, but talking to the father, he was an exceptionally nice man and you would never knew he was rich. Story 6. My aunt is a retired high-end realtor. She got roped into helping this service arrange housing for wealthy F1 fans. These Saudi prince types are from another planet. One mansion for a week isn't enough. They need 6 to 8 mansions next door to each other for a month to accommodate their private medical staff, legal teams, chefs, airplane mechanics, etc. They fly in on multiple private jets and rent entire airports for the weekend. One guy even paid to have a helicopter pad constructed on a property he rented, and then paid to be removed when he was done. All of this for a weekend getaway. Story 7. I installed tile for a major city developer in his personal house, 45,000 square feet on 10 acres in coveted forest land. Needed 2 different satellite dishes for TV service because one wouldn't cover the whole house. Had 2 different tile crews, one for inside and one for outside. Decided to add an infinity pool after construction started. Just a cool impromptu 1 million addition. But the wildest note is that the wife ordered a massive 50,000 natural darkwood countertop from Cameroon, Africa. This sounds like a joke. It took months to be delivered, and when the wife saw it in the house's lighting, she decided she didn't want it and sent it back. These people flew in a private barber from across the country to get their hair cut. exorbitant wealth is ridiculous. Story 8 I'm a pool cleaner and I used to service the pool for the inventor of the fleshlight. Weird dude, super rich. He lives in Texas and had many houses on a ranch and also a palace filled with fleshlights. Naked models having photo shoots all the time. I went into the palace one time and it had beaded curtains everywhere and smelled like. It was a weird experience, lol. Story 9 I was a nanny for about a year for this rich family. The mom's closet was as big as my entire first floor. She never paid attention to her 4 boys. And all she did was shop all day, every day for like 8 to 10 hours, and I mean helping her carry in carloads, every day all clothes for her. Thousands and thousands of dollars worth of clothes, each day for a year mid-year. I asked for a raise from $9.00 an hour for 4 boys to $11.00 an hour. She said no, I quit that day. Story 10 My wife is an attorney. All of her clients are those Arrested Development-style rich people who are completely detached from reality. One of her clients gets a new car every 10,000 miles, rather than going through the trouble of having somebody take the car in for regular maintenance. Story 11 I knew a billionaire pretty well and worked in close proximity to him for years. He was a nice guy, very smart, shy and eclectic, happened to luck into back-to-back excellent business decisions after growing up with a really great childhood. Not all luck, but a lot of it was right time, right place. After a while, people mistook his luck and quietness for genius business acumen, and started to semi-worship him. After a few years of this, he started to believe the hype, and started surrounding himself with sycophants and yes-men who assured him they were his friends. Anyone that challenged him would be exiled from his circle. It was really hard to watch. He ended up going down a path of trying to hack his own body, got heavy into drugs and ended up passing. Really tragic. Story 12 The majority of my clients have $5 million homes. One of my richest clients, who probably has roughly $100 million in real estate, refuses to have smart or electric thermostats in his home. He doesn't want the hassle of batteries, power outages, resetting settings, things like that. So you walk into a big beautiful home on the water, and the old mercury dial thermostat keeps the house at 70 F. He's actually self-made and walks around when help is there and hands out 100 bills to all the workers. He's a genuinely great person, and his wife and kids are as well. Other clients are less hospitable and my invoices reflect it. Story 13 This seems obvious, but they just do not think about money as a real physical thing. You'll be out with a guy having drinks, he sees an apartment he might like, makes a call to his guy, and it's now his, inside unseen, just likes the look and area. Their view of travel is also unreal. Like thanks for the offer to bring me to Rome for a week, just out of the blue, but I have to do tomorrow. Story 14 Worked on a private island once. A billionaire guest asked for ice's cubes made from Evian because tap water ruins the flavor of a 200-year-old scotch. Story 15 I used to manage the personal properties of a super rich farmer developer. One morning he was trying to explain to me about a garden he saw in San Antonio that he wanted to emulate. He got frustrated trying to describe it, so he got on his phone. An hour later me and the gardener were with him on a flight in his private jet. From Idaho, we were picked up by a private car service, taken to the garden, spent a half hour walking around, and went back and got on the jet, didn't even stop for lunch. The fuel for that flight was 2 months of me and the gardener's salary. Story 16 My brother is super rich. If you follow tech you would probably know who he is. While he's basically the same dude he always was and I always enjoy spending time with him, the biggest thing I've noticed over the years is that he just gives zero about money and he uses it to solve issues that probably aren't actually a problem in the most expensive way possible because the decision-making process is fast and easy. Like he will spend $100K to solve a problem that I would not have even considered a problem because the decision to spend $100K is nothing to him and the problem slightly irritated him for a couple of minutes. He also has a massive compound that caters to his desires whenever he may desire it. Like he literally has a spa that operates 365 days a year on his property and he maybe goes and gets a massage like twice a week. I do always really enjoy going to visit though. Story 17 I work at a very high-end restaurant that has some wildly rich clientele. One of these couples came in on a weeknight. They were drinking a bottle of wine worth about $1,200. She got a little animated and spilled a full glass all over her $10,000 dress and $7,000 purse. Her reaction, she just laughed. Said she was gonna soak the dress in more of the same wine when she gets home so it matches and that she was gonna go purse shopping soon anyways so she'd just go grab another one the next day. Her husband was not even fazed. He was chuckling alongside of her. The only reason I knew how much the dress was worth was because he told us. Story 18 Worked for summer cleaning boats at a yacht club so I could get free sailing lessons. One very rich pharmaceutical family had a person hired specifically to bake cookies and brownies. Nothing else, warm cookies and brownies for certain times of day. They had entirely separate culinary pastry staff for other food preparation. She was a public school teacher who loved to bake so it was a great summer job for her, but still blew my mind to conceive of enough wealth to hire staff for such specificities. Story 19 I did some work for a bank in Dubai. They had a department for the elite which consisted of people sitting around waiting for a phone call along the lines of I need $500K in New York. The person in the office would them sort the paperwork and the cash, jump on the next flight to wherever the money was wanted and hand deliver it. Story 20 I worked for the CEO of a major bank. This person K also sits on the board of multiple other companies and charities. They were constantly traveling for work and basically never home. They had an 8-year-old kid who was cared for almost exclusively by a nanny who barely spoke English and spent most of the day on the phone with her family back home, fully ignoring the kid. The kid had terrible grammar and could barely read. She was very juvenile for her age. I don't know for sure if she had an intellectual disability, but I think she was just really neglected. She would sit by herself for hours watching TV shows meant for toddlers. The house was obviously huge and gaudy beyond belief. The driveway was full of luxury cars that never seemed to get driven because Kay was driven around by a chauffeur. I was at the house one day and watched the little girl shriek with delight and go running full tilt towards her parent with her arms outstretched for a hug as Kay stepped through the front door. They'd been away all week traveling for work. As the little girl went in for a hug, Kay said, "I have to go, my driver is waiting." And then closed the door in the kid's face, and left for another week. It seemed obvious to me that this person is an absolute workaholic who should not have become a parent. I later learned that there was teenager too who was in some preppy boarding school and only came home on the weekends. It was really sad. Story 21. I did a bit of technical contracting and I guess by word of mouth got into elite super rich clientele at some point. So a few interesting cases. One, had a guy who lived in a mansion by himself who would pay us $1,200 an hour to plug in a TV power HDMI. He requested a team of a minimum 4 people, all of which must be Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. So we would go over, plug in the TV, then the next 2 to 3 hours was him just being the most racist POS you've ever met, talking about how WW2 should have ended, white supremacy, all of the things. My staff have been briefed about how this job is not to plug in a TV. It's get paid $300 an hour to stand there, smile, nod and take whatever he throws at you. This guy called us up maybe once a month and we were all happy to take his money. I really do think he was just lonely and suffering from some sort of other mental issues though. 2, once had a guy pay us to set up an AV system inside a swimming pool. Just to re-emphasize, inside a swimming pool, he wanted audio-visual fidelity underwater. We showed up with all the equipment and it turns out the swimming pool wasn't even dug yet. They hired another person to dig it on the same morning we were to install the equipment. The swimming pool that he had built that we measured for was a sample one he wanted torn out. They didn't want us to leave either and come back when the pool was in as they wanted workmen around to film something for social media. So we were all paid 500 hours to walk around and look busy like we were extras on a set. I myself carried a spool of HDMI cable for about 6 laps around the house before I picked up a color calibrator and started pointing it and plugging it into trees. 3, was asked to set up a Game of Thrones watch party in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with no road access. Was also told that the cabin was not fully built yet, and that there was no electricity or water to the area yet. We had 5 days. There was a veritable army of contractors running cables, lumber and work crews doing shifts around the clock, but we got a nice plasma TV in there with a satellite connection, great Wi-Fi, septic systems, well water, electrical, emergency generators and HVAC. In those 5 days I probably took in 30,000 Canadian dollars in pay after expenses. Story 22. I've got mega-rich clients. Most of them are first-generation money, grew up on farms or working on oil rigs. You'd never know they were wealthy. There's no shabbiness or suffering, but no ostentatious displays either. They have a nice car, but not nicer than lots of other people who aren't rich. The difference is that theirs isn't financed. They have vacation homes, but purchased with cash and not financed to the eyeballs. Maybe it's like the saying money talks, but wealth whispers. Story 23. I did work for a charity and worked with the high-end donors and got to meet some of the richest people in my country and a number of international celebrities and politicians. The thing I learned most readily is that they are extremely detached from the world and would often recommend I do things that were extremely far out of my or any normal person's budget. They also all viewed themselves as the product of meritocracy despite all having come from stable homes and some degree of wealth, but somehow were always blown away by how hard I worked. Finally, they were often extremely two-faced and extremely polite, only then used their personal assistants to complain on their behalf. I often felt like I was dealing with a kid and learned I was to never say no, instead having to insist that we would look into things for them and that they should enjoy themselves in the meantime. That Terry Moran interview with Trump was so painfully telling of how a billionaire reacts to hearing someone disagree with them. Also, for all the racist conspiracy theorists out there, go to one gala and you will find yourself surrounded by so many wasps that you'd think you stumbled into a hive. Story 24. I spent years working for multi-billionaires in their private homes. A few memories that come to mind. 1. Purchasing 30 pounds of top-quality filet mignon and asking the butcher to grind it up so the chef could make hamburgers for the principal's annual Super Bowl party. I thought the butcher was going to cry too. Sneaking into a child's bedroom in the wee hours of the morning and setting up 500 inflated helium balloons so that the child would wake up to a balloon extravaganza on the morning of their birthday. 3. Sending a housekeeper and gardener 90 minutes up the coast to Malibu to collect diarrhea that the principal's dog had deposited on the private beach used for its morning walk. The stool was collected in 2 separate baggies so that the samples could be sent to 2 separate veterinarians for evaluation. Because you simply can't trust the opinion of just one vet. There was nothing wrong with the dog other than the mister had feta cheese for spending over $500,000 on empty hotel rooms over the course of 3 months. I had to reserve the rooms and have them stocked and ready to go just in case the principal decided he wanted to use them. He rarely did. 5. Bribing a group of university researchers so that they would reschedule their research trip on an icebreaker ship in the Svalbard archipelago because the principal wanted the ship for those dates so he could take photos of polar bears and whales. After 3 days the Mr. and Mrs. both got bored of Norway and returned home early. Story 25. Art galleries will spend thousands of dollars to have a painting installed in a house to see if the client likes it. If they do, they buy it and it stays on the wall. If they don't, gets packed up and taken back and the gallery eats the cost. My girlfriend was a mobile dog groomer in San Francisco. She groomed dogs at several homes on Billionaires Row. With most of her clients, she interfaces with the owner of the dog normal, right? At one house on Billionaires Row, she didn't interface with the owner or even the butler, but with the dog butler. The dog butler didn't groom or walk the dogs. He would just coordinate the schedules of the dog walkers and the dog groomer, he reported to the butler. Story 26. I used to work in ski rentals. Some extremely rich family came in and spent over $1,500 to rent for just an hour as the lifts were about to close. Ski passes too were probably around $1,000 for their whole group. Didn't bat an eye. When they came back, one of the women in the group told me she didn't know how to tie her shoes, and planted her shoe in front of me, then demanded I tie it for her. I just said I'm not going to do that. She rolled her eyes at me and had her husband tie them for her. I worked in tourism for 6 years, and the people with more money than I could ever hope to have were some of the stupidest people I've ever met in my life. Story 27. My boss is uber rich. It's kind of endearing that he always advises me to grab a 10 coupon online. Like, sir, I have just saved you 12. He still stays in cheaper hotels on the company dime. That said, he also dropped $1 million of his own money just to have a more authentic experience on a recent project. Wild. Story 28. I worked as a personal assistant for a rich guy for like 3 months once. How much he was worth, but it was definitely in the tens of millions of dollars. His house was worth $5 million alone, and I know he owned a lot of other properties around the country world. He inherited most his money and dealt in real estate. And let me tell you, this guy was pathetic. He had no friends. He somehow had a girlfriend who he clearly hated, and he told me he was going to break up with her. He was paranoid she only wanted him for his money. He owned a really expensive breed of dog who he took everywhere with him but didn't bother to actually train her, so she was impossible to control and constantly stressed out. He was in his late 50s and lived in a multi-million-dollar house but had not bothered to decorate, furnish, or even clean it. He had multiple living rooms that contained a large TV and one lazy boy chair, and that was it. His guest bedrooms had a mattress on the floor, and nothing else. There was zero art or decoration hung up anywhere in the whole house. There was dog fur everywhere, dirty dishes and takeout containers all over the sink and counter, and it was obvious he'd never once dusted or swept. I also learned that he had 2 siblings, one of whom he was completely estranged from. The other had recently died, and while sorting through his papers and doing some internet research, I learned that he had sued his brother for total control of some of their joint properties while his brother was actively dying from cancer. The guy's personality was also just gross. He was such an He clearly thought extremely highly of himself and looked down on others, even though it was clear to me that he was completely helpless on his own and didn't know how to do anything besides direct his lawyers to sue anyone who looked at him wrong and money from his many tenants. He was impossible to have a conversation with. He would never consider someone else's point of view and would just talk down to you or use his size to intimidate. He is physically a very big man, which made his fragile ego all the more pathetic. He also smelled like absolute. His breath smelled and he had bad BO. If he actually bathed himself regularly. I only knew this guy for 3 months 5 years ago, but I could go on and on about how truly awful of a human being he is. He was constantly angry and miserable, even though he had more than enough money to just relax and be happy and content. He really solidified in me the idea that money can't buy happiness. Or more like, money won't fill that empty, rotten hole inside your soul. Story 29. I work in the luxury industry. I've seen more than a few Ferrari showrooms. I don't mean dealership showrooms, and I don't mean a room that has a Ferrari in it. I mean a residential car showroom full of Ferraris. Probably seen a dozen of these residential Ferrari showrooms over the years, which means there must be hundreds of people out there with them. As a side note, I've met quite a few billionaires who are exactly what you would expect, pretentious douchebags. You wouldn't be surprised to hear who some of those types were if I listed off their names. But for as many of those pretentious douchebag billionaires as there are just as many of them who have been super nice and down to earth. And surprisingly, it doesn't always depend on how they got their money. Some who were born into it are really nice people. Some who grew up poor and became self-made are dickheads. I had one billionaire client who I did a project for in his penthouse in a Manhattan skyscraper. He asked me if I was hungry, and I was like, yeah, I could eat. He left and came back an hour later with burgers and fries for me and himself, and we just hung out at his dining table with a Pollock painting hanging next to us and talked about camping and fishing while we ate burgers. Totally awesome guy. Story 30 was helping a buddy who is an electrician. He works with a lot of super rich clientele. We went out there to wire up a new patio. Guy spent over $100K on this patio. A grilling station, TVs, with nice pavers and all with electric outlets and all. He had it done in 2024. Just went back out there. He had almost everything we did torn out. And he's building a guest house there now. The guest house dwarfs the house I live in. It's a baby mansion to a mansion. Story 31. My son is a contractor. They just finished an outdoor party barn for a wealthy hedge fund manager. One room for $120,000. They followed the architect's plans to the smallest detail. It turned out beautiful. When the guy's wife saw it, she said she hated it and ordered it torn down immediately and replaced. That kind of waste and attitude sickens me. To top it off, they're out of state and may spend 2-3 weeks a year there. Story 32. When I was a student, I shared an apartment with another girl for a whole year. She was very rich, very spoiled, and the apartment belonged to her grandma. We were 21 years old, close to ending college, but she was completely useless with real-life stuff. She had never done laundry before in her whole life, so I had to teach her how to use the washing machine. She didn't know how to make her bed. She was afraid of the dark and begged me to let her sleep in my room. She never used the kitchen because they had a cook in her house and none of her family members ever cooked. Her food was catered every day. Once she asked me to make her a sandwich because she didn't want to touch the cheese with her bare hands as it was icky. She drove a BMW and was shocked that I didn't own a car because everyone does. She had zero knowledge of the world out there. She bought clothes each and every day of the week after college. We are talking about hundreds of euros a day. She owned the TV, so we had to watch what she wanted. If I suggested watching something else, she got mad. Most of the times I just left the apartment and met my friends, which made her even more furious. She hated it that I had a social life besides her. Her grandpa was a very famous, rich attorney, so our professors gave her high grades no matter what she did, because her grandpa donated a lot of money to the faculty. She graduated with the highest grades, but she was clueless. She inherited the family business and is a rich, entitled middle-aged woman that never had to worry about anything in her whole life. Story 33. I write content for super rich people. I know all about them. One thing I can only say is most successful people made it happen because of doing evil things. Story 34. I've got friends who work on super yachts. They've told me a few stories, but one that sticks out is the guy who worked on a yacht with a fancy fish tank. The yacht also had a snow room where they had a snowmaking machine, and people could go in at any time and just play in the snow, I guess. But this fish tank ran the entire height of the staircase in the yacht. You could go up and down the stairs and there'd be fish all the way. It sounded pretty amazing. The problem was that one of the fish they had in there was a shark. So every week the shark would eat all the other fish, and they'd end the week by spending 50K buying more fish to put in with the shark. Story 35. Friend's family is billionaires. Legit, from the medical patents. One time his dad was telling me how he wasn't selling the beach house at the Cape Prob 10 to 15 mil because the house sitter watches the dog at that house when they travel. Story 36. I know of somebody who got married to a very wealthy girl in the 90s. Talking multi-billionaire family members. She was down to earth and totally chill. At their bachelorette party weekend, they each had them in separate family estates, his in Colorado, hers in Connecticut. Earlier in the day, he mentioned to somebody how there wasn't any good pizza in Vail, where they were partying. She had her assistant call his favorite pizza place in Boston and had them close down for the night, put their 2 cooks and owner all on a private charter to Colorado with their supplies, closed down and rented out a local pizza restaurant in Vail with a pizza oven, and surprised him with a dozen pizzas from his favorite pizza place for his bachelor party guys. Total cost of everything was over 100K, in 1990s money. They are still married now over 30 years later, with adult children. His favorite pizza place closed down when the owner retired, so he hired one of the cooks to be his private chef for a few years. Story 37. There are 2 Americas. There's one where not rich people are trying to be good people and be honest. Then there's the rich people using and exploiting those people because they're being good people. Story 38. Not super rich, but my friend asked me to help him do some yard work he was doing for his boss. We took the company truck and loaded the bed full of mulch. His neighborhood was a gated community and the houses were probably 2M or so. His boss was a VP in an oil company and made probably low 7 digits. We did most of the work and forgot a rake for the bush trimmings. Went into the garage for a rake. The only tools in the garage were a small hammer-tack hammer for hanging pictures and a small rake. The rake was something used on a golf course and I am guessing for a sand trap. It had 4 or so tines and could fit in a golf bag. It never, ever occurred to me that someone wouldn't own a rake. Story 39. My mother is in the legal field and her former boss bought 4 condos in a building on Michigan Avenue, Chicago to turn into a single condo. My stepfather is head of security for a billionaire hedge fund manager Forbes 50. He regularly takes private flights to run errands for them. He also has had to work on building armored cars for them, Escalades costing in hundreds of thousands of dollars. Both families are some of the nicest people I have ever met, and both of them have taken care of my family in ways that are above and beyond what is considered normal kindness. Not all uber-wealthy folks. To answer the question, my stepfather's boss flew my family out to NYC for my brother's 30th birthday to see Billy Joel at MSG, paid for the nicest hotel, and set them up at restaurants that we would never be able to afford, and then flew them home on their private jet. Just because they could appreciate my stepfather and weren't going to use their jet for those couple of days. Kind of wild thinking they just casually tossed what I would imagine is 50K at my little brother's birthday without batting an eye. Billionaires are a different breed, but being affiliated with a billionaire does have its perks. Story 40. They will sometimes not take the headache of even learning the cost of something or negotiating. They will have a person for that, such as hiring a housekeeper or gardener. Story 41. I grew up in an area that a lot of wealthy people would have a seasonal home. I worked with glass, plastics, mirrors, etc. Everything from the most generic things to the most specifically custom-made items. The thing I would see very often when giving clients options would be the response, just give me whatever the most expensive options are, not the best. not the best looking for what they were trying, exclusively the most expensive. Do you have any idea how ugly a house looks when you exclusively pick the most expensive option without considering anything else? Some of these multi-million-dollar houses were outright repulsive. Story 42 Private Air Charter. Once saw a woman fly herself and her dog up to Aspen, Colorado because she liked the groomer there. The dog groomer ended up being out sick when the woman arrived. She then flew home empty-handed, and flew back a few days later once the dog groomer was available. All said and done, she spent about $75,000 on a private jet to fly her and her dog out to Aspen and back twice, so she could get the person she wanted to bathe her dog. Once watched a woman fly from FL to CA to spend the day shopping in Beverly Hills because she was annoyed at her husband. She shopped all day and flew back the next morning. She dropped about $100,000 on the last-minute flight, plus whatever she bought that day. She bragged that she used his credit card for everything. She had armloads full of clothes and purses. The next day we found a price tag for one of her purses in the airplane and it was over $10,000. Story 43 I cleaned houses with chemical-free cleaning companies, which the rich people loved. They are the messiest people in the world because they don't have to clean up after themselves. They're entitled to treat their expensive possessions like and then blame the help for their carelessness or expect them to fix their mistakes. It's gross. Story 44 This goes for both the super rich and just normal people. When you leave a will for more than one child, my suggestion is to liquidate your estate and split the money as you will. Way too many times I see families torn apart because siblings don't agree on what to do with physical assets or businesses, especially property. I mean siblings who were the closest no longer even acknowledging each other. Not everyone can agree to keep it as investment and split management equitably. Story 45 I had a conversation with my girlfriend's friend who catered for the Ambani family in London. Basically just stayed at this mansion and she got a real insight into their lives. Many things were said, but the one thing I remember her saying is that the kids' teens would stop and wait at doors for someone to open them for them. She wasn't sure they'd ever opened a door in their lives.